30. We're going to get started in just a minute, but I want to update you on a few things. So we had postponed the book club earlier in the month, just out of an abundance of caution with COVID. We're also not going to go caroling. Part of it is for COVID, like groups of people, even masked and outdoors, but crunched together, asking strangers if we can sing to them. Just doesn't seem like a good look right now. But there's also this weird thing in the community right now where apparently there's somebody sending out groups of carolers who are like super aggressive, not only knocking on strangers' doors, but then like asking to come inside and stuff like that. And it's got the neighborhood kind of up in an uproar. So we don't want to be associated with that in any way, shape, or form. So we're not going to go caroling this Sunday. The COVID fears around the country are really escalating, or they should be. The cases are escalating, increasing pretty substantially. I think there's over 100,000 people tested positive this week. Fortunately, Omicron doesn't seem to be as severe as Delta, but there are many parts of the country where the hospitals are filling up as well. What I understand is that in our area, the infection rates are increasing, but partly because maybe of the vaccines, we have not seen the hospitals fill up. So like, for example, San Mateo County has been kind of in the sort of 10 to 20 person in the hospital range for a number of months now. And that seems to be holding steady. So that's really good news in terms of our area. But we, just out of an abundance of caution, we want to prioritize health and also not have to cancel other things. So we're going to stick to next Wednesday. If anybody wants to join, Bethlehem AD in Redwood City at 1300 Middlefield Road near Main Street in Redwood City. Excuse me. There's a church that puts on this fantastic living nativity. Anyone who wants to join, 6 p.m. on Wednesday. I'm planning to be there and go through with anyone who wants to be there. You can RSVP. That would help me so that if you're late, like we don't leave you. But if not, you can also just show up. I'm going to enjoy it with my family. And we're going to have Christmas Eve. Those are the two special things. Christmas Eve is at 6 p.m. on December 24th, Friday night this year. It's going to be fantastic. So I want to invite you guys to that. Tonight, we're looking at an interesting passage from Matthew chapter 18. So we've just been going through the book of Matthew, and I know that, maybe we should do a Christmas study or something, but we're not going to do that. We're just kind of going through. Christmas studies are for Sundays right now. We're just kind of going through Matthew, and we've gotten to chapter 18. And this is kind of known by people that study Matthew as one of four main teaching sections where just a bunch of things Jesus taught get dumped together. He's been in Capernaum and he's about to start his journey towards Jerusalem. So he's been talking about the cross and about his death, impending death, but he hasn't actually started moving there. Chapter 18 is like a wedge or a transition between this time when he's in his hometown and when he starts to head for Jerusalem to be crucified. And it's a teaching thing. And it's interesting because of what he chooses to teach about. So much of what he's been doing is preparing his disciples for when he's not there, and by extension, preparing the church. And so he's actually talking about church. He's talking about church polity, how churches should behave. And man, churches have ignored this stuff for generations. We have screwed this up. And if we would get this stuff right, there would be a lot less animosity about the church, and we would be a much better witness. Not my church in particular, but church as a whole. Although my churches haven't been perfect either, but I've been pretty blessed, actually. So Matthew chapter 18, beginning with verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And so he called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you that unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes such a child in my name welcomes me." So who's the greatest? Remember the last time this came up, a couple of his disciples were like, well, who's going to be in charge after, Jesus tells them he's going to die. And the first thing they're worried about is, well, what position do I have after he's died, right? It's like people asking about somebody's will when they're about to pass away. And he rebukes them for it and calls for humility that time. And he does kind of the same thing here, except there's no rebuke. Like, this is a genuine question. Who's going to be greatest? Like, when you're gone, who's in charge, kind of thing. And he puts a child, and he's lifting the child up, but not for childishness. And I think that the characteristic really is humble. And he actually names it. He says, unless you change and become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever takes a lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So he's pointing out that those who might not have to take the lowly position, those who may not be the lowliest, but who choose to be a servant, those who choose not to brag about their credentials, those who choose to use their influence to benefit others, and particularly those who are most vulnerable, those are the ones who are greatest in the kingdom of heaven, or who are going to enter the kingdom of heaven. And not only that, but those who show hospitality to those who are most vulnerable are the ones that are going to be greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And it's so different from like the way that our world works, right? Our world is so sort of connected to exploiting whatever power you can get for your own benefit. And often a passage I often quote from Philippians 2 talks about how we as Christians should take the same attitude of Jesus, who didn't use his power and his greatness and his position as God in the flesh. He didn't exploit it for his own benefit, but instead lowered himself. To use these words, he became like the lowly child. And so I think this just emphasizes the importance of humility, the importance of being willing to be a servant if we want to do anything great for God. And so he continues and he says, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble. So some commentators say, and I think this may be right, that there's kind of this shift, like he's talking about children, but he's not really talking about children. He's talking about children, but maybe he's also talking about those who are new to the faith, those whose faith is vulnerable, those who are unsure in the faith. Because he says, one of these little ones, those who believe in me. That's why I think this shift may be occurring, to stumble. It would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of the things that cause people to stumble. Such things must come, but woe to the person through whom they come. If your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off, throw it away. It's better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands and 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. If your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out, throw it away. It's better for you to enter into life with 1 eye than 2 eyes and be thrown into the fire of hell. This is reminiscent of part of the Sermon on the Mount where he's talking about the same kind of, and I think it's clear he doesn't mean this literally, but what he's trying to do is emphasize the significance of this and how important it is to be protective of those who are vulnerable. And I think he means like vulnerable physically, like those who are poor and don't have enough money for rent, those who can't afford food, those who maybe like refugees, stateless, those who don't have rights, those who may endure racism and sexism and stuff like that. I think he's talking about that. But it's pretty clear in this situation, he's also talking about those whose faith is fragile. And we have a lot of that these days, particularly in America, where such a large portion of the American church, and this is probably true around the world as well, has proved itself to be an unsafe place, has sided with political leaders who are deceptive, who are charlatans, and it's clear to the rest of the world. But Christians have aligned themselves, and I mean, this is nothing new. You can go all the way back, like to Nazi Germany is a classic example, where the church with some exceptions, but by and large, the church aligned itself with Hitler and allowed the desire for power to undermine its gospel witness. And I think this is applying that, but maybe in a less political way, that we as churches and we as Christians need to be careful not to undermine the faith of those who are either new to it, or those maybe who are seeking, or those whose faith is fragile and has been harmed. Because these are people, and if I was going to put a because on it, and the passage doesn't, but I think we can easily infer, because these are people that God cares about. These are people that God cares about. If you're strong in your faith, great, but be aware that there are people out there, and you don't always know who they are, whose faith is really weak and fragile and has been beaten up. And so we want to, as Christians, be sensitive to that. So those are some of my thoughts about this passage. What is it? The famous quote. Oh, I forget who said it. I think it's attributed often to Robin Williams, actually, the actor, comedian, who said, everybody is going through something that you aren't aware of, so be kind. It's a kingdom value. Those are some of my thoughts. Hope that's helpful. If you want to join at 7 p.m., the login information for the Zoom call is below. If you want to ask questions, feel free to direct message me, comment in the comments. Any of that stuff is fair game. Otherwise, have a great evening and God bless. I will not be doing this next week or the week after that. 2-week break, start again in the new year. So have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year if I don't see you.